Have you ever wondered how the Israel-Palestine conflict, one of the longest running in modern history, began? Well, let's take a journey back in time to the late 19th century, to the birth of two powerful movements, Zionism and Arab nationalism. Zionism was a Jewish nationalist movement that sought to establish a homeland for Jews in Palestine, the ancestral homeland they had been exiled from centuries ago. On the other side, Arab nationalism was a wave of patriotic fervor that sought sovereignty and independence for Arab lands under Ottoman rule. In the midst of these burgeoning movements, a critical document entered the stage, the Balfour Declaration. Issued by the British government in 1917, it expressed support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. But why was this significant? Well, it was the first time a major world power had endorsed the Zionist movement, giving it a newfound legitimacy and momentum. As we fast forward to the dark era of World War II, we see a dramatic increase in Jewish migration to Palestine. The horrors of the Holocaust had left millions of Jews displaced and seeking refuge. Palestine, with its promise of a Jewish homeland, became a beacon of hope for many. This influx, however, was met with growing resentment from the Arab Palestinians, who saw their demographic majority in the region diminishing. In the years following World War II, tensions escalated, culminating in the United Nations Partition Plan of 1947. This plan proposed dividing Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. However, the plan was rejected by Arab nations and Palestinian leaders. This brings us to a pivotal moment in history, the establishment of Israel in 1948. Unilaterally declared by Jewish leaders, it was a triumph for the Zionist movement but a catastrophe, or Nakba, for the Arab Palestinians, who found themselves dispossessed and displaced. With the establishment of Israel in 1948, the stage was set for a conflict that would shape the Middle East for decades to come. The creation of Israel was not accepted by its Arab neighbors, leading to the First Arab-Israeli War in 1948. This war was a landmark event that not only transformed the political landscape of the Middle East, but also had profound implications for the people living there. The roots of this conflict extend back to the late 19th century, when a nationalist movement known as Zionism began advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Fast forward to 1947, the United Nations proposed a partition plan dividing Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. The Jewish leaders accepted this plan, but it was vehemently opposed by the Arab leaders, who saw it as a violation of the rights of the majority Arab population in Palestine. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared its independence. The very next day, 5 Arab nations, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, launched a military intervention. Their stated aim was to protect the Arab inhabitants of Palestine from the Zionist aggression. The war was marked by fierce battles, shifting front lines, and a great human cost. The most significant event was the displacement of an estimated 700,000 Palestinians from their homes, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic. These refugees were either expelled or fled from fear, and their descendants today form a significant proportion of the Palestinian population. By the time the fighting stopped in 1949, Israel had not only managed to survive but also expanded its territory beyond the boundaries set by the UN Partition Plan. The war officially ended with armistice agreements signed between Israel and each of the Arab states involved. However, these agreements were not peace treaties. They did not resolve the underlying issues, nor did they establish formal diplomatic relations between Israel and the Arab states. The 1948 war ended with armistice agreements, but it was clear that the conflict was far from over. The war had reshaped the Middle East, setting the stage for the decades of conflict and negotiation that would follow. The question of Palestine remained unanswered, a ticking time bomb in the heart of the Middle East. 1967 marked a significant turning point in the Israel-Palestine conflict with the Six-Day War. This was a brief yet intensely fought conflict that saw Israel pitted against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. In just under a week, Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The Six-Day War was a game-changer. Israel had gone from being a small, relatively young country surrounded by hostile neighbors to a regional power that controlled vast territories. The war also resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, adding another layer to the already complex issue of refugees in the region. The aftermath of the Six-Day War saw an Israel that was territorially much larger but also more isolated. The occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem led to international condemnation and further strained Israel's relationships with its Arab neighbors. Inside these occupied territories, the Palestinian population found themselves living under Israeli rule. This led to a significant shift in the dynamics of the conflict. Palestinians who had previously been citizens of Jordan or Egypt were now under the control of Israel, a state many didn't recognize. The impact of the occupation was vast and multifaceted. On one hand, it provided Israel with a sense of security, as the newly acquired territories served as a buffer zone against potential external threats. On the other hand, it plunged the region into decades of unrest and violence, as Palestinians resisted the occupation, leading to numerous uprisings or intifadas. The occupation also led to a significant demographic shift. Israeli settlements started springing up in the occupied territories, leading to a steady increase in the Jewish population in these areas. This, coupled with the displacement of Palestinians, has further complicated the issue, making a peaceful resolution even more elusive. The occupation has remained a core issue in the Israel-Palestine conflict, sparking numerous uprisings and peace initiatives. The Six-Day War and its aftermath have undeniably shaped the course of the conflict, leaving a legacy that continues to reverberate in the region to this day. The 1990s saw a glimmer of hope for peace with the Oslo Accords, but this was soon overshadowed by the Second Intifada. The Oslo Accords, a pair of agreements between the government of Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, were signed in Washington, D.C. in 1993 and 95. These accords marked the first direct, face-to-face agreements between the two sides, and they seemed to promise a path toward resolution. The agreements aimed to establish a framework for future negotiations, and to ensure mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO. However, the accords were not without their critics. Some Palestinians felt that the agreements did not do enough to address key issues such as the right of return for refugees, the status of Jerusalem, and the building of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. On the Israeli side, there were concerns about security, and the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. Ultimately, the Oslo Accords failed to bring about a lasting peace. The reasons are complex, but key factors include the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who was a key driver of the peace process, ongoing Israeli settlement expansion, and the lack of a clear roadmap for final status negotiations. The failure of the Oslo Accords led to a period of intense violence known as the Second Intifada, which erupted in 2000. Unlike the First Intifada, which was largely a civilian uprising, the Second Intifada saw increased militarization and a significant rise in suicide bombings. This period deepened mistrust and hostility between Israelis and Palestinians, leading to a further deterioration of relations. The Second Intifada left an indelible mark on the psyche of both Israelis and Palestinians. It not only led to a high number of casualties on both sides but also further entrenched the divisions and hardened attitudes, making the prospect of peace even more elusive. The failure of the Oslo Accords and the violence of the Second Intifada have left deep scars on both sides of the conflict. The Israel-Palestine conflict continues to this day, with no clear solution in sight. The region remains a hotbed of tension, a complex web of political, religious, and territorial disputes that have been brewing for more than a century. At the heart of the current situation lies the ongoing occupation of Palestinian territories by Israel. This occupation, which began in the aftermath of the Six-Day War in 1967, has been marked by a cycle of violence and counter-violence, perpetuating a state of perpetual instability. One of the key issues exacerbating the conflict is the presence of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories. Despite widespread international condemnation, these settlements have proliferated over the years, creating a significant obstacle to the peace process. They are seen as a violation of international law and a major hindrance to the establishment of a viable, contiguous Palestinian state. Another contentious issue is the status of Jerusalem, a city of immense religious and historical significance to both Jews and Muslims. Its status remains one of the most sensitive and complex aspects of the conflict, with both Israelis and Palestinians laying claim to it as their capital. As we look to the future, there are several possible scenarios, each with its own set of challenges. A two-state solution, long considered the most viable option, seems increasingly out of reach due to the expansion of settlements and the political realities on the ground. A one-state solution, while theoretically possible, raises significant questions about the nature of such a state and the rights and protections of its diverse population. The road to peace is fraught with obstacles, from deeply ingrained historical grievances to geopolitical complexities. However, the desire for peace is strong, on both sides of the conflict. It's a yearning that's palpable, coursing through the streets of Jerusalem, resonating in the hearts of those living in the shadow of the conflict. While the road to peace seems long and fraught with obstacles, the hope for a just resolution endures, fueled by the aspirations of the people on both sides of the conflict.